Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Verleih uns Frieden gnädiglich, which translates to graciously grant us peace. This is an absolute mammoth of a chorale. It fills up 2 complete pages. So I think we're just going to hop right into the analysis. It has some interesting quirks and tidbits, but I want to keep the video under an hour, which I don't imagine it's going to get to. But if I talked about everything in as much detail as I have for some of the shorter chorales, this video would get very, very long, and it's going to be longer as is. Anyways, so let's just hop right into it. No key signature. We start on A minor. We end on A major, as you can see right here. So I reckon we are in the key of A minor. We start off with a tonic triad, like I said. We then have D, C, F, and A. Interesting chord here. That's D minor 7 in root position, which is our subdominant 7. Then we have some passing tones in the alto and the bass. I'm just going to go ahead and move the second page off because it's making it difficult for me to write. Sorry also that the font is smaller. I had to keep it on 2 pages by sizing the staves down a little bit smaller than we're used to looking at. We then have E, B, F, D, D, and A. That's D minor in first inversion, so we're going to change the figured bass to reflect that. 8, 6, 3. With a neighbor tone in, actually, apologies, this B is an accented non-chord tone. There we go. I guess you could, no, never mind, we're in the key of A minor. I was going to say that was a 7 chord, but it's a 7 chord in the key of C major. But then we have E, B, E, and G sharp. That's E major in root position. That's a 5 chord, passing 7th on the bass. And then we get C, C, E, and A, which is A minor in first inversion, our tonic triad. We have 4 passing tones. All of the voices are moving here, so I think Bach's subdividing the harmonic rhythm. Here we have B, D, G sharp, and B. That's G sharp diminished over B. That's 7, 6. And then we would assume that we have a tonic triad on the other side, A, E, A, and C, which we do in root position more specifically. We then have E major, E, E, G sharp, and B. That is our 5 chord, passing 7th in the tenor. And then we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. Looking ahead, we have a half cadence in the key of A minor, no modulations just yet. So we have another A minor triad, A, C, E, and C. We then have G, B, G, and D. This is a root position 7 chord, a subtonic 7th that some people call 5 of 3. I've seen it analyzed that way, depending on how you look at the role of the 7th, whether or not the 7th is always a leading tone and any subtonics are functioning as a secondary dominant. I tend to find that not entirely true, but I've seen this analysis, so I'll include it when it's relevant. But then we have E, B, G, and D. Now you could analyze this as a minor 5, 7, but I think it's more likely that this E is an accented non-chord tone, and this is just a passing 6, 4. This is just G over D, D, B, G, and D. Then we have C major, C, C, G, and E. That's our 3 chords, so 7 is going to 3 like we would typically expect, but sometimes it goes to 1, so this function is not always accurate. Passing tone on the bass, we get E, C, G, and C. That's taking the 3 chord and inverting it to first inversion, which is quickly reversed back to root position. We see this figuration a lot in Bach where we step, step, and then skip in the opposite direction. We then have F, C, A, and D. That's D minor, D minor 7 in first inversion. That's 4, 6, 5. Passing tone in the tenor before we get E major, E, B, G sharp, and E. That is a 5 chord. And more specifically, this is a Phrygian half cadence because of the half step movement in the bass. The textbook talks about that, or textbooks in general just talk about that. Sorry, my table is very cluttered today. Some of the things are making it into the frame that I don't want. Okay, next phrase, we have an ending a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E minor, so no modulations just yet. We have another E major triad on beat 1, E, B, G sharp, and E. That is beat 1 of the phrase, beat 4 of this measure. We then have A minor, A, C, A, and E. That's our tonic triad, root position, passing tone in the bass. And then we have F sharp, D, A, and D with a passing 7th in the tenor. This would be 4-6, uppercase 4, because D major would be our harmonization of the melodic minor scale, which is what's happening in the bass here. Raise 6, raise 7th, tonic. Then we get G sharp, B, E, and E with a passing 7th in the melody. That's E major over G sharp. That's 5-6 in the key of A minor, and that resolves where we would expect A, C, E, and C, which is our tonic triad and root position, A minor, passing 7th in the bass, passing tone in the tenor, and then we have F, A, and D. That's D minor in first inversion, 4-6. This D is a chord tone, this C is a passing 7th. We then get E, E, A, and B. This A is a 4-3 suspension over the bass. This G sharp is actually our chord tone, implying 5, E major, and then we cadence on A minor, A, C, E, and A. Okay, looking ahead, we have kind of an interesting phrase, actually very interesting phrase here. So I think you can make the argument that either this cadence could look like a plagal cadence, which is what I think it is, or a half cadence in the key of D minor. I'm going to make the argument that it's a plagal cadence, but I think you could make the argument it's a half cadence. Okay, we immediately go to F major, F, C, F, and A. That is a 6 chord in the key of A minor, passing tones here in the melody and the tenor, and then we have E, E, G natural, and C. That's C major in first inversion. This kind of makes it feel like we're in the key of C major briefly here, but I don't entirely think that we are, just because we feel like if we look at the 6 going to 3 in the key of A minor, that's the same thing as saying 4 going to 1 in the key of C major, but I don't think we've modulated. Passing tones in the inner voices, and then we get A minor, A, C, E, and C, which is our tonic triad. We've seen this 6-3-1 progression a couple of times recently, actually. I think in yesterday's chorale and in the chorale the day before. And the thing about this particular progression is that it's 3 tonic functioning triads for the most part. They are keeping the progression very static. There's not really a lot of progression going on because the chords share so many tones with one another. 6 and 3 not so much, but both 6 and 3 share tones with 2 of them to be exact. We have a passing 7th in the bass, passing tone in the tenor, and then we have F, A, and D. That's D minor in first inversion, which is 4-6. We know that from earlier. Passing tone in the tenor before we get E, C, G, and C. Bit of a deceptive progression here. We would expect this 4-6 to go to 5 or something, but it's going to C major in root position again, which is 3-6. Not root position, first inversion. Did I say first inversion? If I didn't, apologies. But then we have another subdivision of the harmonic rhythm here. We know that because all the voices are moving, and if all the voices move by step, we're going to get some other chord, typically a chord that's adjacent. And here we have D, D, F, and B. That's B diminished in first inversion. That's 2-6, and as we get closer to the cadence, it makes sense to see this chord. But afterwards, we don't get the chord we would expect. We get C sharp in the bass. We have C sharp, E, E, and A. And in this case, that A major chord, I think, is functioning as a secondary dominant, more specifically 5-6 of 4, because A is the dominant of D, and D is our 4. We then have D, D, F, and A. That's D minor in root position, so it resolves where we would expect. This C sharp is a neighbor tone, this E is a neighbor tone, this G is a 7th, I forgot to mark that. And then, interestingly, juxtaposing what I feel like is functioning like a secondary dominant on beat 1 is what I'm calling our tonic now in the key of A minor, our major tonic, this C sharp right here carrying over. The use of the Picardy third in minor chorales is something we've been seeing a lot frequently, Usually this is reserved for the end of the chorale. It doesn't suggest that that's the only place it can happen. I mean, this chorale is proving that it can happen in the middle of it, just like the chorales we've seen in the past. But the fact that we have a major tonic here after D minor is tonicized really does make it feel like it's a half cadence. But the reason why I think this is a plagal cadence just has to do with context and the way that I hear it. I really can't make a completely definitive decision as to which one it is, but I'm analyzing it as a plagal cadence just because of the way that it sounds. It really does still feel like A is our tonic here, and it's just one of those unusual cadences that I think has an ambiguous identity. Okay, looking ahead, we have another perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. So we're still in the key of A minor here, in my opinion, even though there might be some like little subsections that feel like we're in the key of C major. I think largely we're analyzing in the key of A minor here, which is why I keep it consistent. We then have B, D, G, and D. That is 7, 6, or subtonic 7th. Some people might analyze this as 5, 6 of 3, and that goes where we would expect it to, C, C, G, and E, which is our 3 chord. Following the cycle of falling fifths, we have a passing tone in the tenor, and then we have D, A, F, and D. That's a root position D minor triad. That's our 4 chord. Passing tone in the bass before we get F, A, C, and A. That is F major in root position. That's a 6 chord in the key of A minor. Passing tones in the upper voices. I guess we kind of could look at this as like a passing 7 chord. But I don't really think it contributes too much to the progression, so we will just leave it as it is. We then have E, G, E, and C. That's another 3 chord in first inversion, so 3, 6. Lots of 3 here, which makes me feel like this little section could potentially be in the key of C major, but I think Bach is just freely flowing between C major and A minor, and just because the relative major is getting some emphasis doesn't mean that we've modulated. We haven't had the dominant yet. The only dominant we've had is right here at the beginning, which I guess we could make an argument that we are in the key of C starting right off the bat, like A major. Well, A major going to G major has a very modal sound, so I think this would be more direct than anything else. But this A minor should just be considered, or sorry, this A major should just be considered or treated the same as an A minor. The use of the Picardy third, I think, is more so just a byproduct of Bach's choice to tonicize D minor before the progression ends at the cadence. All in all, I think, you know, the analysis is kind of shaky here because Bach is doing some pushing of boundaries. He's thinking outside the box here, and it's hard to exactly pinpoint what's going on, but I think this is one succinct way of analyzing it. You can choose to analyze this in the key of D minor if you'd like. I just don't hear it that way, especially with the melody feeling as rooted in A minor as it sounds. But yes, moving ahead, we have sort of this illusion with E being the root of C major and turning into the 5 in the melodic minor scale, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A. So these two passing tones here spell a chord, F sharp, A, E, and C. That's F sharp minor 7 flat 5, so that would be 6, 7, a literal root position harmonization of the melodic minor scale. And on the next beat we get G sharp, B, E, and B. That is a first inversion 5 chord, E major, and then we get another subdivision of the harmonic rhythm here. We have A, C, A, and A, which is an incomplete tonic triad, which is our 1 chord. So we're seeing a lot of activity going on in between these two beats. We then have E, D, A, and B. This A is a 4-3 suspension over the bass. It's this G sharp that we're looking at here, which would make this a 5-7 chord. E7 in root position, and then we cadence on A minor this time, A, C, E, and A, root position, tonic, triad. Alright, going into our penultimate cadence on this page, we have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of C major, and I think this whole phrase for the most part is in the key of C major. We can make an argument that the move to C happens as late as the end of the first measure, the first complete measure of this phrase. I'm going to go ahead and say that we modulate right off the bat. we'll say that the second A minor triad here, A, C, E, and A, is actually our pivot chord. It's 6. And then we have B7, D sharp, B, F sharp, and A, which is B7 over D sharp, which would be our secondary dominant of 3, because E minor is our 3 chord. And then we get E, B, E, and G, which is our 3 chord, so it's resolving the way we would expect. We then get A minor, A, E, and C, which is our 6 chord. 3 wants to go to 6. I guess you could make the argument that this is a minor 5, and we're still in the key of A minor as far as this is concerned, but I think with the lack of G sharps, I think we're just as far away from A minor as we are from C major, so why not analyze it in the key of C major this early? I think also the melody starts to sound a lot like C major here. A, G, C. It just sounds like C is being tonicized by this point. But then we move to, after this passing tone that is, we move to G, B, G, and D. That is our 5 chord in the key of C major. And then we have C, C, G, and E, which is our tonic triad and root position. A couple of passing tones, 3 of them in the lower voices and in the melody. That's like B, D, G, and B. That's like a passing 5-6 chord, so I'll go ahead and analyze that because that's a normative progression. We then get A, E, A, and C. That's A minor in root position. That's our 6 chord, so a bit of a deceptive progression, albeit the 5 is very brief. It only happens over an 8th note. And then we have a passing 7th in the bass before we get F, A, and D. That's D minor in first inversion, 2-6. Bach loves 2-6 chords in cadential contexts especially, so 6 going to 2 is also a good sign. Passing tone in the tenor. This C is also a non-chord tone in this context. And then we have G, B, G, and D. That's a root position 5 chord. And we have a we have a pretty much a textbook cadence here, 2-6-5. And then C major, C, C, G, and E. That's a 1 chord. Okay, looking ahead, we have another cadence in the key of C major. This time it's a perfect authentic cadence, so no need to reanalyze. Here we have A, C, F, and F. That's a first inversion F major triad. That's 4-6. We then have G, C, G, and E. That's C major over G. That's a 1-6-4 chord. Then we have F, C, A, and D. That's D minor 7 over F, which is 2-6-5. And then we go to something along the lines of G major, but this C is a 4-3 suspension over the bass. We have G, C, G, and D. That is a 5 chord. This E is a non-chord tone. This G and this E are enclosing this F here, which is part of a 7 chord now. G, B, F, and D. This C is an anticipation. So we could just change the figure bass to 7 there. And then we cadence on C major, C, G, E, and C. Okay, looking ahead, let me go ahead and flip the page. We're looking for kind of an interesting cadence here. So if we go to the second page, this C major triad for the record is a tonic triad still with a passing tone here in the alto. So we're going to go ahead and move to page 2. Bearing that in mind, I think there are 2 different ways we can analyze this. We could analyze this cadence here on A major as another imperfect authentic cadence, or we could analyze it as a half cadence, and after listening to it a couple dozen times, really just trying to decide it, I'm siding more on the spectrum that it is a half cadence rather than an imperfect authentic cadence, but I think you can make the argument that it is an imperfect authentic cadence as well. But we go immediately to G sharp, B, B, and E. That's E major over G sharp. That's a 5-6 chord, and that goes to A minor, A, E, A, and C with a passing 7th in the bass, and then we get D minor, F, A, and D. So D minor in first inversion. I think this is where we modulate to the key of D minor. It is now a 1-6 chord, passing tone in the bass, passing tone in the melody, so in the outer voices, and the chord gets turned into root position D, D, A, and F. So we'll just change the figured bass to reflect that, and then we cadence on A major, A, C sharp, A, and E. And I think the aspects that turned the scale for me, or the big characteristic is that one of the hallmarks of the half cadence that makes it feel like a half cadence is the presence of the fifth in the melody. This is not true of all half cadences, but what makes it feel particularly half cadential is the fact that that E really wants to resolve down to D, especially when further contextualized with the C sharp. So the C sharp in there wants to resolve up to D. This E really feels like it wants to resolve down to D, or maybe even up to F. That's just what it sounds like to me, which makes it feel more like a half cadence than imperfect authentic. But I think you could analyze this as imperfect authentic. I just don't think that's the correct analysis based on what's being heard. It's more of an analysis based on what's on the page and trying to satisfy a particular analytical narrative, like trying to keep it in the key of A minor. And you could do that, but I don't think that's what's happening. That's just my opinion. But we did have a cadence similar to this where D minor and A minor were both sort of being alluded to at the same time earlier in the chorale. So if you chose to stay consistent in that regard, that's great. But in my mind, these cadences don't have the same sonic effect. But moving forward, we actually have a direct modulation to the key of C major. So we have A major. I was thinking of C sharp when I was saying that. So we have A major, and then we're moving to G major immediately afterwards, that same sort of modal sound we heard earlier. Here we have B, D, G, and G. And we have this very interesting long pedal tone. We're going to analyze that once we get to it. But G major in first inversion, that is 5/6. And then we cadence, or we resolve where we expect C major, C, C, G, and E. And we might be tempted to call that a one chord, but we have this passing B flat here, and that tells a very important story to me. It feels like we are now tonicizing F rather than cadencing on a tonic. So I think this chord is actually 5/4, even though 1 would be correct, because this passing flat seventh tells a different story about the chord on the beat. And now we have a pedal tone, so I'm going to go ahead and put parentheses around the length of the pedal tone. I've seen a couple of versions. I've seen one where the pedal is reiterated over the whole bar. I've seen versions where it's just a long whole note, and in this case I'm just going to analyze the harmonies on top of it in this parentheses and keep the C out of it. Even though C is a chord tone for all of the chords involved, I'm just going to put them in parentheses because the bass doesn't change and the bass is being held for effect. So 5/4 goes to 4 like we would expect, F, A, and C. And remember again, I'm not keeping in mind inversions here. That's the way that conventionally pedal tones are analyzed. So at least that's the way that I learned how to do it. We have a passing tone in the alto before we get G, E, and E. I think the C actually does play a role in this chord because, let's be honest, what's being implied here, it's definitely a tonic triad, so we will use the bass in analyzing this one. I know after I just said we're not going to keep the bass in consideration, it's all about context, right? The bass isn't going to change really the feel of the inversion of the chord. We're going to hear this C as a pedal, and that's going to be delineated or separate. It's going to be a separate sound from the rest of the supporting voices, at least until the pedal stops. And then we have C, C, G, and E with this B flat here. So remember, this B flat changes the function of the C major triad to dominant, so we'll call this 5/4, and that resolves where we would expect it to, this B flat being an accented non-chord tone. Oh, sorry, I jumped the gun there. This is not where the resolution happens. This is another 5 chord, C, B flat, G, and E. So we'll just change the figured bass there to reflect the fact that it's a 7 chord now. And then we have F major, F, A, and C, which is a 4 chord. So it resolves the way we would expect. It just takes a bit longer. And then we get the B and the G here. Those are non-chord tones in relation to F major. And we're working towards our perfect authentic cadence in the key of C major. So we have C, C, G, and E. That's our root position C major triad. Passing tone in the bass, passing tone in the alto. We then have E, C, E, and G. That's a tonic triad, C major in first inversion, so we'll change that. We then have B, F, and F. So just some non-chord tones, can't really analyze that. And then we have E, C, G, and E again. That's another C major triad in first inversion, no need to reanalyze. Passing tone in the bass before we get G, C, G, and D. This C is a 4-3 suspension over the bass. This A is an enclosure, just like how we saw on the first page. We have the surrounding of the resolution of this suspension. So this is what's a 5 chord. The 5 is being implied, and then it resolves on beat 2. The F is delayed. That's a non-chord tone, a delayed 7th, and then we cadence on C major, C, G, E, and C, which is our tonic triad in root position. Okay, looking ahead, we have an interesting cadence. We have actually a deceptive cadence in the key of A minor, and I don't see where there's any reason why we can't just modulate or analyze this as a modulation to A minor right off the bat. We have C, C, G, and E. That's C major in root position. That's a 3 chord now in the key of A minor with some passing tones in the alto and the bass. We then have A, B, B, and E. This A is an accented non-chord tone. It's this G sharp we're looking for. G sharp, B, B, and E. That's E major over G sharp. That's 5-6, and that resolves where we would expect A minor, A, C, E, and C, which is our tonic triad in root position. Passing 7th in the bass, passing 7th in the tenor, and then we have F, A, D, and D, another D minor triad in first inversion. That's 4-6 in the key of A minor, passing tone in the bass before we get F, F, A, and C. That's F major in root position. That's a 6 chord, passing 7th in the bass, and then we get D, F, A, and B. That is kind of a difficult situation here because I think we can make the argument that this is like a... Actually, no. This is definitely a 2 chord that's happening here. It's a minor 7 flat 5 in second inversion. It's over... Oh no, it's not even in second inversion. It's in first inversion. Bach loves his 2-6-5 chords. And this E, and this G sharp, as well as this D, those are all... Oh no, this D is a chord tone in relation to that chord. Apologies. So this, what's happening off of the beat is E major in root position. That's just a 5 chord before we cadence on not A minor, but F major, F, C, A, and A, which is a deceptive cadence because that's our 6 chord. Okay, looking ahead, we have maybe the most interesting cadence in the entire... I don't know, maybe it's the most interesting. The more that I think about it, it might be like the second most interesting. But we have this very quick cadence that brings attention to D minor. We have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of D minor. What I hear is the key of D minor, but you could also call this like a supertonic cadence, and that we're... the fact that we were moving to the key of C major, and then we're cadencing on D minor. It feels like D is very much a tacked on thought. This idea that D is kind of sprung on us unexpectedly kind of has a similar effect that the deceptive cadence does, but in a much more abrasive fashion. But I do think we modulate straight away to the key of C major, and this F major chord is now our 4. We then have C, C, E, and G. That's our tonic triad C major, passing 7th in the tenor, passing tone in the alto, and then we have F, A, C, and A. That's another 4 chord, root position, passing tones in the upper voices. Here we have like F, A, D, and B. It's like another passing 7 chord. We can call that 7-4-3 before we cadence on C major again, C, G, E, and C, which is our tonic triad in first inversion. And then we have some neighbor tones going on here, but I also think that this chord right here is where we modulate. We really get sprung on very unexpectedly, so there's not a lot of room for a normative progression. So I do think that if we're modulating to the key of D minor, it's either direct, where we get just a move to A major right after the C major chord, and it's just an abrupt leap of a third between the 2 chords, but I think we can say that this C major chord is actually our 7 in the key of D minor as well, because it is. And then we get the C sharp as sort of like a false relations between the 2 keys. But this D is an accented non-chord tone. We're looking at C sharp, G, E, and A. That's A7 over C sharp. That's 5/6 in the key of D minor. And then we cadence on D minor, D, F, D, and A. And what I'm calling an imperfect authentic cadence, but I guess you could call this like a supertonic cadence as well. I don't think I've heard that terminology used, but what it really sounds like is that there's a tonicization of a chord in the key, but I don't really think there's vocabulary to suggest that, and really all a supertonic cadence is, when you are preceding it with its dominant, is some type of authentic cadence anyways. So 6 of one, half dozen of another. We could talk about it at length, but we're closing in on the end of the chorale, and this video is not nearly as long as I thought it was going to be, or maybe it is. Oh no, this is still a pretty long video. Apologies, I was just doing some number crunching in my head. But we're closing in on the final cadence. We have some interesting counterpoint at the end that is kind of hard to pick apart. So we are looking at a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. We're looking for a point on which we modulate back, and I don't think there's any particular reason why we can't just say this D minor triad is our 4 in the key of, oh, I'm so sorry, we're not modulating to the key of A minor just yet. That happens towards the end of the phrase. We're actually modulating to the key of C, and I think this is a 2 chord, and we're going to get some adjacent harmony here. 2 is going to go to E minor, E, G, B, and G, which is our 3 chord in the key of C major. So we have 2, we have 3, and then we have E, G, C, and A, or sorry, E, F, C, and A. That's F major 7 over E. That is a 4/4/2 chord, a very uncommon chord for not really any particular reason. It's just not a chord we see voiced very frequently in Bach's music. So there aren't too many 4/7 chords anyways. It's relatively uncommon. We usually see them in minor contexts as like 4/4/6 as like a byproduct of harmonizing the melodic minor scale, but here we're seeing a 4/4/2 chord in a major key. It's pretty neat. So some adjacent harmony, right? 2, 3, 4, and that's going to go to a 7 chord, D, F, F, and B, which is B diminished over D. That's 7/6. Bass resolves the way we would expect it to. The chordal 7th resolves down by step. This E is a non-chord tone. This F is a chord tone, and then we're moving to C major, E, G, E, and C, which is our tonic triad in first inversion, followed by a couple of passing tones in the lower voices. It's kind of like another passing F7 chord, like a 4/7, but I don't think it's super important that we actually might as well. We could say that we have a little bit of a 4/7 going on here, and the reason why I decided to do that is because we have G, B, E, and B going on here. So we know that there is some sort of semblance. If we call this E a, well, if we look at this E literally and say that it's a chord tone, this would be E minor in first inversion, which would be 3/6. A little bit of a deceptive progression because we're going where we don't expect. But I think this is actually a 5/7 chord. An incomplete 5/7, but a 5/7 nonetheless, because this E feels kind of like there's a word for it, but a suspension that resolves upwards rather than downwards. It doesn't have the same feel, but it's still there, and they do happen from time to time. Actually with some frequency, a lot of them aren't super dissonant. In this case, it's like a 6 going to a 7th, so it is like a dissonance. But I'm going to call it a 5/7 chord because I feel like this E is an accented non-chord tone. That's just how it sounds to me, and the way that it takes up that much space in the rhythm and then resolves upwards, or I guess it's not technically a resolution, but the fact that it goes upwards afterwards seems significant to me. Alright, then we get some interesting harmony. We get the C sharp again. We have G, C sharp, A, and A. That's A7 over G, which would be 5/4/2. And let's make sure that that's right, actually. So we have the A and we have the C sharp, but we don't have the E. So the E above, so G up to A is the 7th. G up to E would be a 6. G up to C sharp would be a 4. Where does the 2 come? Oh no, G up to A would be the 2. G up to C sharp would be the 4. So we have the important ingredients. The fact that the 5th's not in there doesn't make a difference. That would be G up to E, which would be a 6. Yeah, we don't need the 6. 4-2 is the shorthand anyways, and that's what this reflects. So this would be a secondary dominant, or at least the way that I'm looking at it would be a secondary dominant. So we could say that we modulate as early as the G chord, but I'm going to say we modulate a bit later because this counterpoint kind of muddies things anyways, and until we see that C natural, I'm not super inclined to believe that we've modulated. So I'm going to call this 5-4-2 of 2, and if we look on the offbeat, we have D, D, F, D, A, and A, which would be 2-6, and I think we're actually modulating in and around this zone, and I'm going to say we modulate off on the offbeat in the key of A minor. This 2-6 chord, this D minor over F, is actually 4-6 as well, and then we have E and E, which are chord tones in relation to A major, or A7. They're both chord tones. I'm not going to mark it though, it's very cramped and not super important. But the 4-6 chord retains on the next beat, F sharp, A, and A. I know that looks more like a 6 chord in the key of A minor, but if we look at the next beat, we have D and D happening at the same time, even though the alto has this G interrupting the F happening at the same time, which is a chord tone. This G is not a chord tone, but I do still think that D minor is being implied here, especially in anticipation for the cadence. We have E, C, E, and A, which is A minor in second inversion, A minor over E. This B is a non-chord tone, this A is a chord tone. We then have E, B, E, and G sharp, that's E major in root position, that's a 5 chord, and then we cadence on, actually I could use the bracket here to signify the closeness, the relationship between the 1-6-4 and the 5. Some textbooks do that. And then we cadence on A major, A, C sharp, E, and A, which is our major tonic. Bach often does that with his minor chorales because I speculate that it's because it's the last movement, and he wants the last movement of the cantata, and he wants to end on a more uplifting note. So that's why I think he does, but that's speculative. I'm not 100% certain. Regardless, that is today's analysis. Very hefty, very long video. I'm very tired after having analyzed everything on this page. It's very dense. There's a lot of writing. Sorry if you had to zoom in or squint or like really strain your eyes trying to see my analysis if you're comparing it to your own. But all in all, this is a very fascinating chorale. It's a very lengthy chorale. Ultimately, the analysis, the harmony more or less operated mostly functionally. It's just these interesting cadences that have dual or even sometimes 3 identities is difficult for me to really concede and stick to one analysis. I'd like to offer 3 or 4 different viewpoints if possible, but sticking to one analysis is something that you have to do for the sake of presenting a complete work, and that's something that I'm trying to demonstrate by doing today. But do offer some counterpoints to suggest a broader set of possibilities when possible. That's something that I think a strong analyst, that's just something that a good analyst will do. Regardless, I think I pretty much spoke at length about everything I wanted to in this particular chorale. It speaks for itself. Sorry, I'm at a loss for words because I've really spoken a lot about this chorale. It's just a long video, and I did go into detail about the things that I wanted to at length, so I covered it in the video. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. If you'd like to follow me along on this journey and you haven't already done so, feel free to consider subscribing and hitting the notification icon. I upload once a day, so if you want your daily dose of Bach or your daily dose of analysis, I can provide that for you, and I look forward to seeing you on future videos. Again, thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.